Hutchinson City Council. Linda, call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Here.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Deckent.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've asked Vice Mayor Inskeep to lead us in an opening prayer. Dave?
I told him this may sound a lot like my Thanksgiving grace, so bear with me. If you'll pray with me, bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for the day. Thank you for our health, and I pray for our safety during this time of celebration with the fireworks. Pray for our brave firemen and police officers and EMS, if they have to respond to anything, that it's not anything severe. Please guide us with our decision making today, and in God's name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Next item, please.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
This is a time where there's an opportunity for members of the audience to come forward and address the council on items that are not already on the agenda. We would ask you limit your remarks to 5 minutes or less, please. Jana, good morning.
Good morning. Jana McCarran, Director of Planning and Development for one last day. But I wanted to actually recognize Amy Allison. She took the American Institute of Certified Planners exam in May and passed with flying colors. And this is a national certification in the state of Kansas. There were only 2 people who took the test and are fully certified. So I just want to recognize her and congratulate her on her achievement. And as you know, she's been promoted to senior planner. So.
Great.
You're here. Congratulations, Amy. You need to be embarrassed once in a while, don't you?
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Don't envy you the position that you're in, some of the decisions you have to make, but I did want to make a plea.
Excuse me, ma'am. Would you give us your name and address,
I'm
please?
sorry. Yes, Kathy Moore. Technically, right now, I don't live in Hutch. Lived in Hutch for many, many years, a little bit south of town now, but this is where my time and my money is spent. So I felt that I was in order. Years ago, when I was growing up, Hutchinson was sometimes referred to as the retail center for western Kansas. Obviously, those days are gone, at least for a while. In contrast, the interest in the ever-expanding cultural activities continue to bring new visitors. I contacted the director of Stage 9 to find out what the total attendance for Fiddler on the Roof was. He told me that there were 2,600 people who attended. Obviously a great boon to Hutchinson. The average attendance at the Hutch Art Center I checked into, the events that they hold, receptions and the auction, just various events, they have 200 to 300 people show up for these. I checked the guest register and there were 15 states that were represented there, literally from the 4 corners of the country: Oregon, California, Massachusetts, Florida, and many others. The visitors that are drawn to these events, such as the art exhibits, the symphony, the live stage productions, are obviously likely to stay and enjoy a meal of some of the unique local shops like the Antique District, and yes, even the occasional overnight stay. We could maybe ask nearby Lindsborg just about what a positive effect a vibrant art community can have on a town. The groups, the funding for groups include support for the diversity that's represented in the community by supporting the Emancipation Day celebration and Cinco de Mayo. Active supporters of the arts include individuals and groups that initiate or support other activities such as Third Thursday, the Hutchinson ComCon, public murals, the sculpture walk. I don't know how they could be expected to continue their support for a community that didn't demonstrate its support for the arts. The failure to support these activities that attract visitors can only result in discouraging the best hope for the city's future growth and development. Those who are on social media to any extent have probably seen the meme, the picture of Winston Churchill with the quote, "When Churchill was asked to cut funding to the arts in order to support the war effort in World War II, he responded, 'Then what would we be fighting for?'" Now, this is one of those things you find on social media. There's no proof he actually said that. However, he did in a speech say, and incidentally, he was quite a painter himself, "The arts are essential to any complete national life. The state owes it to itself to sustain and encourage them. We are reminded of the old saying that it is by art man gets nearest to the angels and farthest from the animals." So I just wanted to take this opportunity. I know this will be an issue in the near future. Wanted to take the opportunity to please consider the arts community worthy of support by the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And I want to use the opportunity to say that I think I speak for all of us. We welcome the interest and the input, especially as it during this time of the year involves the budget. And I would encourage folks, not only in regards to the issue of funding for arts, but the myriad of departments and things that the city funds. Having input is helpful. And so, again, thank you for your comments.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. I would accept that I am basically the culprit that brought to the table a week ago in a budget study session. This is part of a proposal. And first of all, I would certainly share with you, Kathy Moore, that this has been a very, very painful process and very, very difficult. I certainly cannot disagree in any respect in terms of the wonderful opportunities that the Hutchinson community over the past many, many years have grown the arts and the cultural communities into what we know today. We are faced with some very, very difficult budget decisions. I think you all understand that. It really hit me as an elected official when I read the city manager's budget message a week ago, and I shared that with the rest of the council, that when we were talking about and looking at the city manager and the department heads that cut almost 10% of a $35 million budget, or just right at $3 million, which includes cutting 7 positions. We cut a substantial amount of capital improvements, machinery and equipment. And one of the other things that really caught my attention was in his remarks indicated that there would be, at this particular juncture of the budget's process, that there would be no merit pay increases for some of our 400 employees who certainly have earned some of those needed merit increases. So I was faced with a decision in terms of not necessarily just relying and going back to the city manager and the department head saying, "Well, you find another $1 million." I felt a shared responsibility that as an elected official, it was incumbent upon me to place before the council some discussion items, which certainly included, unfortunately, some outside agency funding that we have been involved in, including the cultural arts and humanities component. Even included the United Way, if you can imagine that we've phased down that funding, but we're down to about $9,900 a year, and to not fund them. The Market Hutchinson program of about $90,000. I felt it was a responsibility that I could not just include or exclude certain entities that suggested some budget cuts to our airport. Unfortunately, 10% to our airport, to our golf course, to our street maintenance, and to our animal shelter. So it was as inclusive as I could see based on the information that I have in terms of why I presented that. It certainly does not reflect what I would choose and like to do. And again, at this point, it's only for discussion purposes. A week from today, we will have a board study or a study session that we had directed the staff to consider what I had proposed, along with some other some other options, and that we will take another revised look at that a week from today in a study session. So I feel it's important that you perhaps get the benefit of some of my thinking. And believe me, it's very, 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 very painful. I dislike this tremendously, but feel we have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to the entire city of Hutchinson. So I hope that explains a little bit of my thinking.
John, I thanked you a week ago, and I'll reiterate that. I appreciate thoughts, ideas, and I think that whether I agree or disagree is irrelevant, but that the comments you made for discussion stimulate conversation and get us to thinking about things. And I think that's what we've got to do, and we do have some tough decisions. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the council? Seeing none. Next item, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Here, yes.
That too.
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Next item.
Item 6A, consider resolution declaring 225 South Main as a blighted building.
Good morning, Council. Jim Seitnader, Downtown Development Manager. Here this morning to ask your help in a really important project for downtown Hutchinson. It's a landmark building on the south anchor of our downtown district, and we need your help in declaring the building as blighted, and then to authorize a resolution to apply for a grant, which would be a perfect tool for us to help the Cooley, Scott and Jen Cooley, in mitigating the major problems on the building, as you'll see in a series of slides as Casey presents the grant application here. But major masonry work, almost all of the windows are either deteriorated, some are gone. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the building. The Downtown Commercial Rehabilitation Program grant is the perfect tool to help fix these problems and to assist a expanding business in downtown Hutchinson have a better space. And the future of that building is a mix of many potential great uses, so we're excited about the potential there. Casey Tillman is here from the SCED office, who has written the grant and would be our grant administrator through the process, and Mr. Scott Cooley, who I like to thank and appreciate all that he's done. This would be his second major building renovation in downtown Hutchinson. So I'll ask Casey Tillman to explain the grant process.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm Casey Tillman from SCED right now, and I have for you, I've been working with Scott and Jim on a CDBG application to the Kansas Department of Commerce. This one is for a downtown commercial rehabilitation, so it's not actually limited to the annual round, and it's not going to impact any future funding you guys would like to pursue. What this is for up to $250,000 for a downtown building that is deemed slum and blight. The purpose is to be used on exterior work and interior code issues, and then anything required to make the business start will be on behalf of the business owner, which is Scott. Right now, we're looking at the building at the Stevens building at 225 South Maine. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of masonry issues around the exterior of the building. The interior is really not that bad, except it doesn't have a lot of the basic code necessities such as water and electric. It doesn't have any heating and air, and those are all things we're looking to remedy with this grant application. Currently, the project is at about $335,000, and we're requesting from the state $250,000, and then that'll be matched with $85,000 from Scott and the business. As you guys have probably been through this process before, the major pieces of that are two resolutions. The first one declaring the building slum and blight and eligible for the program. The second one is authorizing the mayor to sign all of the necessary documents in the application, as well as authorizing the application to be submitted. The other documents that you'll sign off on that are pretty standard. There's a basic one saying that the application is correct. There's a statement of assurances and certifications describing basically a list of the program requirements and stuff that will follow through the grant process, which as administrator I'll help you guys, I'll guide you along the way. And then a anti-dislocation and relocation plan saying that if we get rid of any buildings that are occupied, that we'll have to relocate them. This building is currently completely unoccupied. And then a disclosure report describing the architectural and administrative services, and then a determination of level of review. As part of the application, I have to submit a HUD environmental review, and I've already been working on that, and we've set that as categorical exclusion subject to. All of those signatures are going to be authorized by the resolution. The first part, though, is that we hold a public hearing informing the public of the project and accepting their input.
So Casey, the decision on the grant would be made in early January?
No, this one will actually be made within 45 days. It doesn't fall on the annual round that they do, and so this is actually 2018 funds that we're applying for, and they'll let us know within 45 days if we're awarded or not.
Okay. I was looking at the timeline provided to us, and it shows that it's about an 11-month project beginning in January, but it could technically begin as soon as we find out.
As soon as we get the design work done, really. That's what that is a little bit of leeway for the design work to be done.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
Okay. Just for clarification purposes, and I'm glad you mentioned the $85,000 of local match, Scott, and your wife, in terms of your commitment to that. I think that's terrific, and it certainly shows a demonstration of your commitment to the property. My question is that there's a line item of $17,000 of administrative fees. I guess I'm wondering who pays that?
CDBG actually has grant funds for that, and it is assigned the maximum amount that grant funds that can be used on administrative activities is $17,000. So that's what we set it as. Technically, it's the grant that pays for that, but the way that we've set up the budget is that it shows the line item on the local side just so that it can be covered. So that's going to be covered with match funds, and then
with match funds, not
yes, and then the balance of
City
that,
of Hutchinson.
Exactly.
Funds.
Yeah.
No,
and then
city
the balance
doesn't have
of that.
anything.
No, I understand. Yeah.
No, this is going to be grant funds. And
very good. That's all. I just needed
Yeah,
a clarification on that.
Yeah.
Casey, you mentioned public hearing. Does this serve as that
Yes.
hearing?
Yeah, we published a week ago a public hearing notice noting that this morning was going to be the public hearing, and so we can open that up whenever you'd like.
Okay. Well, I want to second what Councilmember Daveline said in terms of to the Coolies. Fantastic building to be bringing back into usability. What's the building been used for recently, or in the last 3 to 5 years or so, or 10 years even?
Mostly recently it was just storage.
Just
it had
storage.
no viable use.
Okay. Other questions from the council?
Do we need a motion to open a public hearing?
Does the notice say that it would be a public hearing and not just at a council meeting?
Yes.
All right, then we need a motion to open up a public hearing.
Okay, I move that we open a public hearing on declaring 225 South Main as a blighted building.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Daveline?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. All right, the public hearing is open. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this issue?
August.
Mr. Cooley is in the audience if if he is so inclined.
Yes, thank you. Scott Cooley, I'll say 24 South Main presently is where we're located. So I'm open to questions if anybody has any at this moment.
No, glad
Scott, I
to
did read, I think, I would ask you, that part of your thoughts or plans maybe to include some living space in the building?
Yeah, so kind of not to put the cart before the horse, but we're moving from an existing facility of 7,000 square feet approximately to about 47,000 square feet. So obviously just having a boutique salon and spa is not going to take 47,000 square feet. This is going to end up being a multi-phase project. So what you're seeing proposed today is literally just barely phase one. It's to address exterior items, mechanicals, code issues, things to bring the building back online so that we can develop the interior. This is what's proposed today is the very base. So when they say 335 or 55 or whatever the figure is, it's going to be exponentially more money than that in the next 2 to 3 years. But all that we can propose right now is exactly what it's going to take to bring the building online, so we can use it for our existing purposes. But yeah, we do have some other mixed use plans available. There's plenty of space for a myriad of other things, and we have things in the works, just nothing we can disclose at the moment. So,
So this 300 and some thousand, that will bring it to the point or bring you into the building and the business?
Correct. That's going to address the exterior masonry issues, windows, storefront, facade, some code issues, mechanical items. There's presently no HVAC in the entire building. It's basically one big warehouse. So to be able to use that for commercial purposes is going to take a lot more build out. So it'll go in phases, as few as 2 and as many as 4 is what we have planned.
But your spa and salon will be moving in
Yes.
upon this completion of this part of the work.
Correct. Yes. So as part of, if we are awarded the grant, we have to have an existing business within 12 months of closing of the grant.
Oh,
so
okay.
there is a timeline. It's not like you're just given the money and then you go out and seek business. So this is it's very specific driven.
Okay.
Well, we wish you well.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had great success in downtown. I've been involved with downtown for almost 10 years now in some form or another. So it's great, and we hope to see more folks join us.
Yeah, it is very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, Scott.
Any other comments?
I move we
Thank you.
close the public hearing.
A second.
Second. Motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Digline?
Yes.
Pyrus-Dick-Harbala?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
And I'll say yes as well.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We got off track.
Yeah, I am.
Jim, anything else to add before we have a motion?
No, I would only say that it is a historic building. It's on the historic register, so all of the work, everything will be reviewed and needs to be approved through the historic district, and that's something, or through the historical society. That's something Casey's working on now too. So it'll be a great addition to downtown Hutchinson, a tremendous anchor building to the south end of downtown, and really be a way to help start utilizing the parking lot that we built across the street, which was a big piece in the grant application too. So it fits a lot of boxes for us, and it is absolutely the perfect tool, because the only way you can get this money is if there's a business to go into the space, and Jen's Day Spa and Boutique is definitely an expanding, proven business, so it's just a perfect match for this grant money.
Okay, so does this mean, Jim, down the road, they can possibly apply for historic tax credits as well?
That is something that we've been down that path. We've had the historic preservation professional Brenda Spencer walk through with us and
Okay,
things. So
good.
that's a decision, because the historic tax credits sometimes work better, for certain projects. And with the federal especially, it's kind of a one-shot deal, so you want to use it with the high-end parts of a major project. So a second floor housing component would probably be the time to utilize those kinds of credits for Scott.
Good, got it.
And Jim, I didn't hear you mention all those in the materials we received. This is the oldest standing building?
Well, if you look at the
In down.
south side there, you can't see it from this.
The one before. Yeah, that one.
That front portion?
Yeah, if you see the little small square-looking piece that's 3 stories, that was the original watermill building. The creek used to run right beside it. There was a wheel, and that's how Hutchinson's first power was developed. And that building is basically still intact. And so it's a building that's been built around over the years. The history of the building was as a wholesale grocer kind of supply company, Guyman Petro. And then, of course, most of us know it as the Stevens Building. But tons and tons of heating and air conditioning equipment was shipped all across the country out of that building. And so it is truly a key historic building, and Scott and Jen will be breathing new life into it. And I think the uses that will eventually come there will really be exciting.
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Okay.
Is there a motion for
I would move to approve
Resolution?
a resolution declaring a building blighted with respect to the Kansas Small Cities Community Development Block Grant Program, and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
Okay, then the motion is second for the resolution. Is there any discussion? No. Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes?
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. And we need a second motion.
Okay. I will move to approve the resolution certifying the legal authority to apply for the Kansas Small Cities Community Development Block Grant Program from the Kansas Department of Commerce, authorizing the mayor to sign and submit such an application, and authorizing the mayor to sign the resolution. That's a mouthful.
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes?
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, Jana.
Great.
I've asked Jana to kind of break up or separate her presentation as best she can. I didn't give her a whole lot of notice. The quantity of material and the size and scope of what we will be discussing in item 6B, I thought it was just so voluminous it might get cumbersome to try to discuss the whole thing at once. And so I've asked her to kind of follow the 5 motions that are suggested to us as kind of the roadmap and deal with those issues separately. The 2 biggest pieces obviously being the landscaping and paving, but I think even the administrative adjustment, being brand new, may take some particular looking at. So Jana's presentation might seem a little disjointed to us, since I think she was planning on presenting it all at once, but she's going to do so differently as I had asked. The other thing I want to comment on before we get started, and I may forget, is there has been a tremendous amount of work by the planning department, by Jana, by Amy, and the staff on this, and I want to acknowledge that. And this was I think a 2019 kind of scheduled event in the comprehensive plan, and so it was advanced a full year, and has been going on for several months now, if not longer. As well as I know that the group that Jade proposed late last year certainly has been working on this as well. So again, to staff, my thanks and job well done, because there's obviously a lot of work and a good product that's going into this. So with that, Jana.
Okay. Good morning again. Jana McCarran, Director of Planning and Development, and I'll do my best. I like to say that the zoning ordinance has tentacles. So, you know, if you want to change one thing, it's not so simple usually as just changing that thing. You have to find all the other places that that thing are referenced and change those things. So that's why there's 5 sections. Some of the changes are just simply making other sections match, but some of them are not. And so I'll try to do my best, given the presentation I have, and I didn't have time to change the presentation. So anyway, just a little background. Our current zoning regulations were adopted in 2011, and they are a lot more stringent in some areas than our former regulations. For example, the trigger for having to comply with the regulations was increased substantially. It used to be 50%. So if you were expanding your building, and as long as it was less than 50% expansion, you didn't have to comply with the new regulations. You didn't have to put landscaping in or add parking spaces. Under the new regulations, that trigger was reduced to 20%, or 1,000 square feet, whichever was less. So virtually every project that people have wanted to build have triggered the thresholds. And so what's happened is that we have had a lot more work, of course, at the counter to do, and also applicants have been somewhat, I would say, discouraged from making improvements to their properties. Although, as we go through this, I'll show you what some of the other cities require. So we're really not so far out of line. But updating the landscaping regulations and the parking standards were part of the comprehensive plan, as Mayor Deckent mentioned, and they were part of our work plan for next year. Some of the reasons why we wanted to do this is for landscaping, we have a complicated point system. It's very difficult to explain to applicants. It's difficult for us to even be able to assess when someone turns their landscaping plans in. And the requirements were pretty extensive. So we wanted to be able to simplify the code, loosen some of the requirements if you're expanding, replace that point-based system, which people didn't understand. There's really only a couple of design professionals in town who are any good at it at all. Replace our parking lot landscaping requirements with incentives rather than saying you must do it, saying if you do it, we're going to give you an incentive. Focus our landscaping on key corridors and reduce irrigation requirements. For the parking and paving, so I'm just doing the summary. We wanted to simplify the code, again, loosen the expansion requirements, encourage redevelopment of non-conforming properties, reduce stormwater runoff, and provide affordable paving alternatives for residential driveways. So throughout the process, we held a study session with the Planning Commission on April 17th, and then the Development Review Committee met on April 24th, and we met with various and sundry other interested parties, including the Young Professionals, Chamber of Commerce, Hutchinson, Reno County Board of Realtors, and the Hutchinson Housing Commission, providing them copies of the proposed amendments. And the summary of those comments and everything were included in your packet. So I have parking first, and you have parking first. Yay. So this is the first resolution. So I'm just going to summarize what we're proposing to change. And then if you have questions or want to know what the existing is, just let me know. So we're not proposing to change the surfacing materials. There was some discussion that maybe asphalt millings with slurry seal should be allowed on commercial or properties, but in talking to the engineering department, they said that really that slurry sealing isn't really done much anymore, and it wouldn't really hold up necessarily to commercial traffic. For a residential driveway, it's probably okay, but commercial and industrial applications really probably not. And so our standard would still be for regular parking place spaces for commercial and industrial, that they either be paved with asphalt or with concrete. But we are proposing for residential driveways that they may even be allowed to put paver strips in, which are just strips of either brick or concrete. Well, I suppose you could use asphalt, but people really don't. It's not a good application for it. Where your tires drive. And then you kind of mow, or you have gravel on either side of that. And that's used a lot, especially in the older parts of town. You'll see driveways that are like that. It's pretty effective, and it's a lot less expensive for people. Although we are proposing some exemptions for the surface material. If you have an existing parking lot and you change the use, right now you're required to comply. If there's more parking required, if it requires a conditional use permit or a special use permit. So as an example, the tavern, Kenny's Bar, on East 4th Avenue. They had a gravel parking lot, and they had to come through and get a conditional use permit, special use permit for the tavern use. And so the Planning Commission gave them a year to pave that parking lot, and they have paved it. Another example, Rob's Garage, they had a conditional use permit for auto repair on East 4th Avenue. It was a gravel parking lot. They had a year to pave it. You guys gave them a year. They didn't pave it. They asked for an extension. I can't remember if they had, I think they were in there almost 2 full years, and they still hadn't paved it, so you pulled back their conditional use permit, and they had to cease operations. Under the proposed code, if the building's there and has an existing parking lot, even if it requires some kind of special permit, they would not have to pave. Also, under the proposed code, additions to existing structures that are smaller than 30% of the total existing building would not require paving. So I own, I don't know, Dairy King out there on East 4th. I keep using East 4th because I drive East 4th a lot. I own Dairy King. I want to add on a small little extension in the back. As long as it's less than 30% of the total area, I don't have to, it doesn't trigger anything. And then overflow equipment parking areas and employee vehicle parking for trucking uses, we're proposing that those can be gravel. We kind of have been allowing that anyway, but we wanted to put it in our code so it's clear that would be allowed. So an example, Jackson's Dairy, they have some gravel parking over on the east side in the back. Probably you guys don't know it, you don't see it. Sun Valley Trucking, they had an overflow area behind their building. And then I think I already talked about this. Same exemptions for 1 to 3 family dwellings, but no requirement for vehicles parked in the rear yard to be on a paved surface. We had kind of changed that anyway, allowing people to have gravel driveways in the rear to a detached garage. So this just kind of marries that up. And then paver strips would be allowed in the front yard in existing neighborhoods and for overflow parking areas. I told you I was going to show you how we stacked up with other communities as far as that triggering that threshold for expansion. So we looked, and I wanted to thank the staff for very quickly pulling these stats together, but these are some comparison communities, not all, not everyone, but Dodge City, Garden City, Manhattan, Newton, so forth. Most all of them on landscaping have all expansions, 10, 20. The only one out there that's a little bit high is Topeka. 50% expansion is when the landscaping is triggered. If you look at the paving, by and large, all expansions require you to provide additional parking, or at least assess it and make sure you have enough. So we used to sit at 50% for both. We were really on kind of out there compared to the rest of the state. In my opinion, we probably brought it too far from where we were to go down to 20. So we feel like 30% is going to be at least more palatable and hopefully encouraging the people who want to expand their businesses. And I just also wanted to note that on the remodeling side, some communities even require you to assess your paving and your landscaping if you're remodeling, if you're doing 50% of appraised value. So let's just say the Stevens building, which he's not here anymore, but just say if that was more than 50%, which we know it's going to be, of his appraised value, the city would look at the paving and the parking and the landscaping. So we don't require that. We're not proposing that we would, but just to kind of give you an idea of what's out there. The number of spaces required, we simplified the table and we're trying to match it to our use table categories, which you will see probably in August, and then reduce the minimum number of spaces required. People can always provide more, but what we were seeing, and I want to thank Erin and Amy especially for doing the comparison table that was in your packet. We were seeing we were on the high side on a lot of our standards. And I think that's probably just because we hadn't really, I don't think they looked at them when they went to the new zoning regulations. I think they just kind of took what they had or similar things. But places like Lawrence have a lot more liberal standards, and I think that's because they've updated them recently. A lot of other cities really just haven't gone through and said, well, how many parking spaces do we really need? Do we need to look like Kmart, or do we need to look like a different, like Dillon's, you know, where you don't have quite so many parking spaces. And we also propose to take away the maximum. Right now in our code, we have, you can't go over a certain number of parking spaces. We've only had, since I've been here, well, actually since I've been here, we've had nobody want to go over the maximum, because I think the cost of asphalt and concrete has risen substantially. And so it's a big cost for development. But I know before I got here, a couple of the schools did get variances to go over the maximum. Yeah. So if we just take that out, people probably aren't going to build more spaces than they really need to have, just because it is expensive. Loading requirements, we're proposing to require all loading to occur on the subject property and not in the right-of-way or alley. Right now our code has very specific requirements for the loading. They're difficult to administer, and quite frankly, people can't really fit that on our requirements right now, so they can't go in required parking spaces. Well, we've kind of had to let people do that because there's just no other place to put them. And so typically people are going to have their deliveries come in the morning, or they're going to come, you know, after customers aren't there. It doesn't behoove a business to have deliveries happening when they have their main customer base there. And downtown, there's an exemption. Of course, downtown you can't, there's no place on the site to load. Even with our loading requirements, sometimes people load from the street, so. We already talked about that. We took away the maximum parking standard. Bicycle parking, there was a little oopsie in the red line, but it was fixed in the final. So we're proposing that that bicycle parking be recommended. It's recommended now, and that they actually get a credit. So every bicycle rack that for every 10 parking spaces, they place one bicycle rack, I guess it would be, and a 2 parking space credit if you meet or exceed that. So hopefully we'll see more bicycle racks, because we're trying to turn it around to like, you know, here's an incentive.
Where would those racks go? Because I know they can't be on the right of way, or maybe they can be on the right of way with permission or something, or how does that work?
Well, in most places, you know, downtown would be a little different, but most places I would assume they want to put them up by the building.
Right.
People aren't going to want to put their bicycle out by the right of way.
Any further away than they have to. But I thought there were some rules about putting a rack.
There are. We didn't change those locations. So if you want to work on that section, I'd say let's defer that to another time.
No problem.
Okay. I think we're okay.
Boats, RVs, and trailers. Right now, you cannot park a boat, RV, or trailer in your front yard. And this is a difficult thing for us to enforce. It's probably one of the most common complaints that we get, but we only get them in one part of town. Another part of town, we never get complaints about boats, trailers, or RVs. And so, and the other problem is when we send them a letter, they might move the boat or RV for 2 weeks. Till we come and take the picture, and then it shows back up. So we talked to the other groups, and this was a suggestion that I think was the realtors came up with, that maybe a small boat or a smaller RV would be okay. I think the concern was they just didn't want to be looking at this giant megalith of a vehicle in the front yard, destroying their view. So this is what we're proposing with the help, 18 feet in length maximum, 10 feet in height. So if you had the big motorhome, you wouldn't be able to put that in your front yard. You'd have to either put it in the back or rent a space someplace for it. But the smaller things you could. And they would have to be on a paved surface. So this example here, that boat would not be allowed because it is actually on the grass. Let me get a pointer here. Yeah, so this boat here would not be allowed because that's on the grass. But if it was on a paved parking space, it'd be okay.
What about pavers? You mentioned that for the other.
I think that would be okay. You know, the intent is not to be dragging dirt and dust and mud all over the streets.
So if that area were paved in some fashion where the boat sets, that would be allowable under the new regulations?
Yeah, we do have a requirement that not more than 40%, I think it is, of your front yard can be paved. So, I don't know, this one might not be able to have that boat in the front yard because I think if he built another driveway there, he's probably looking at 50%, which would be too high. But possibly.
Pavers wouldn't take up as much space. So
Right,
that
I
might be the
mean,
end around, so to speak.
I would say if I were him, is that a palm tree?
I don't know, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That must be a fake one, right? I don't know. I'm sorry, I never noticed that. I don't think this is in town here.
That's not good.
I don't think it is either.
Anyway, I would say in this case, I would put pavers here and park the boat on the side.
Sure.
You know, I don't know why this person has it in the middle of their front yard, but. Anyway, personally, planning staff said, let's just do away with the requirement because it's so hard for us to enforce. And let's face it, a judge is not going to send someone to jail for having, or even fine them for having a boat in their front yard. They're not going to do it, so.
How would that mesh with or meld or not with front yard parking of vehicles? Not a driveway necessarily, but if I, again, put pavers down, can I park in my front yard, my vehicle?
Yeah, you could. But you can't use more than 40% of your front yard for parking. So, you know, even if it's pavers, it's still parking. That's how I would interpret it. So, I mean, I'm not going to be here after today, but I'm suggesting that we interpret it that way. Because really, you don't want to look at a whole front yard that's just a parking lot. Those aren't very attractive things to look at. I don't think it's the message we want to send to our neighborhoods. And then I don't know if this is lastly, another thing that we're proposing to change is to change the drive-through and drive-up stacking requirements. Right now, our drive-through restaurants is 10. And that doesn't matter whether it's a new restaurant or infill, it's 10. And so almost every single infill case we've had has had to get a variance. They just physically can't fit 10 22 feet long spaces on their property. So we're proposing to reduce those. Yeah, there might be a couple times a day where, you know, someone might have to drive by or drive around the block. But at the end of the day, we feel like this is a lot more palatable, and so did all the users that we talked with.
Okay.
And then shared parking, we have an interesting table that we've all kind of looked at and can't really figure out what it's supposed to say. So we're suggesting that if you want to use shared parking, that a parking study be done and submitted to the directors of planning and engineering. So the instances where you would use a shared parking would be if you had like a retail and a restaurant and maybe an office, and they're all sharing the same area, but they have different times of high peak use.
Yeah, I think one example I can think of is Taco John's and Brown Shoe Fit and Genesis, because that's all shared parking up there. And it was a little chaotic at the time. So.
Yeah, and so you know, you can do that without saying, okay, Taco John's, you need 18, and Brown Shoe Fit, you need 22, and so what happens is you end up with more parking than you really need because people are not going to go work out at the same time that they're going to buy shoes, is the theory. But there are people who do these parking studies, traffic engineers, that can provide that information to us and also keep abreast of trends.
Yeah.
And then we're proposing to eliminate the CR district requirements. They had special requirements on the parking, but we just really haven't seen that district develop like we thought. And the places that have developed, they're putting their parking in the front yard, which it says they're not supposed to. So we just figure we'll just treat them like C4, like our special commercial district. And maybe over time, those properties will redevelop, but they haven't really for the most part. And that's the end of the parking section. Did you have any questions for me?
think you answered this, Janet, but I want to ask you, asphalt millings, where and how can they be used?
Asphalt
Under the
millings,
new
just plain
proposed?
asphalt millings cannot be used unless it's an overflow employee parking lot. But asphalt millings with slurry seal
Okay, with slurry seal.
can be used on residential. Well, actually, I think we took that out. I don't know that we're proposing that you use it. We have asphalt millings with seal, because the slurry seal technique is what our city engineer said, they're not really doing that anymore. But not for commercial. According to him, and it's not gonna hold up to traffic.
So if the review is triggered, asphalt millings with seal cannot be used.
Right, so, but you'd have to be
except in the
at
residential.
30% or more expansion.
I'm sorry?
You'd have to be, for the review to be triggered for an existing building, you have to be at a 30% or more expansion.
Correct.
And I would want to also add that our planning commission deliberated this expansion percentage probably close to an hour. Because looking at the table, some of them felt like, why are we changing this? Because we do look like we're gonna be on the high side. But at the end of the day, I think what they balanced out is, well, where did we come from? We came from 50. So I think they felt like the 30% was reasonable. So as an example, Dairy King, it didn't, it wouldn't have had, it doesn't have to pave, it didn't have to because it didn't change uses. But trying to think what the guy's going to use it for. Mutiera, the owner Mutiera, who opened up the banquet hall on West 4th, he would not have to pave. And I think we gave him a year to pave, so he'll just petition to come under the new rules. The taverns, all the taverns we looked at, or the auto repair, their existing uses, they're not even adding on. They would not have to pave under these proposed regulations. They could just keep their gravel.
I think you briefly mentioned, but I'm trying to absorb all of this. As it relates to commercial rear parking, I wrote down rear parking, screening requirements, paving. Tell me what is being proposed as far as rear parking and paving and screening. Okay, so it's only overflow parking that would not be required to be paved. Screening is in the landscape section. Okay, yeah, all right.
But yeah, so we're thinking mostly this is going to fall with industrial uses. Most commercial uses don't have overflow parking areas. They just, they don't want their customers or themselves parking on unpaved areas. But it does help, like with Jackson Dairy, Sun Valley Trucking. I don't know if, do you know if Siemens has any overflow unpaved parking? They don't, but they could. So if they had like we have allowed it for fleet vehicles. So if I own big trucks, rather than making a paved area for them to have to park on, they can park, but it's in the rear. Is how it would work. They're not going to put that out front. And if it's not clear enough, we probably want to change it to make sure that it says those have to be in the rear of the building.
You'd mentioned, or maybe it was in the materials, could you clarify for me the incentives? So for the individual that doesn't have to pay but chooses to, what were those incentives?
Oh, yeah, I didn't, it's actually in the landscape, so part of it's in the landscape.
Blends, you said tentacles.
Yeah, so what we're proposing on the bicycle is that if you meet or exceed, so let's just say you have one bicycle space per every 10 parking spaces. You have 50 parking spaces, so that would be 5 bicycle spaces.
Gotcha.
If you do that, if you put in 5 bicycle parking spaces, you would get a 2-space credit on your required parking. So you could really just put in 48 spaces.
Oh, I follow you. Okay.
That's how that would work. And then I'll talk about the other one when we get to the landscaping section.
Okay.
The current paving codes move us towards, over time, having everything paved. Am I correct?
That was
or
intent.
that's kind of seemed to be the intent.
Yeah.
This is kind of a backtrack on that,
This
actually.
would actually move away from that
Away
to
from
a
that.
certain extent. It would. And I guess, you know, the thinking of that was the recommendation of the development committee. We got strong support by the realtors who are trying to sell these buildings, and then they find out, well, we have to pave a parking lot. And the cost, it used to be that asphalt was significantly cheaper than concrete, but as the price of gasoline has risen, those two are directly tied to one another. And so they're pretty similar, is my understanding. Plus, we don't have, we only have one asphalt batch plant in town, so they kind of have a monopoly. So there's a lot of factors, but it's just expensive. I don't know how else to word it. So they're just what we're hearing, and I think this is what Councilmember Pyrus de Carvalho was hearing, is that it's just, these buildings are not going to be reused because it's too expensive to bring them up to standards. Now, I guess I can play devil's advocate a little bit, because our old standard was 50%, and they still weren't being reused. So, I mean, I guess to me it looks like we're trying to make it a little more palatable. I don't know, guys. This is a tough one for me, because as a planner, professional planner, I don't really think that gravel looks all that great, and it has other impacts. It gets drug out on the street, gets into your storm drain system, causes chips in your windshield when people and trucks drive over it and they kick up the gravel onto your car. But at the end of the day, do we want to see a bunch of empty buildings, or would we rather have somebody in there and hopefully starting to generate some revenue to where they can eventually pave?
Yeah, Rob's garage still frustrates me.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's one that was a bad deal all the way around. So.
You mentioned approaches, and the approach is that area between the street and basically to the
Right.
inner edge of the sidewalk,
Yeah.
or up to the sidewalk. That has to be concrete, but nothing beyond that.
If it's a brand new development, you got to pay. So
Granted.
we're talking about existing.
Existing, yes, existing. And then ADA parking. Would you talk to
Right,
that?
I didn't put that in my presentation, but we're proposing that all ADA parking spaces, all required ones, be paved.
Yeah.
It is nearly impossible to drive a wheelchair over gravel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, and so as an example, the one on North Van Buren, Banquet Hall, he did pave his ADA parking space without us even telling him he had to. He realized, well, how are they going to get in?
Sure.
You know.
Jenny, you know I've raised this before. Is there a way to incrementally achieve greater paving without it being all up front and being the significant initial outlay up front, but incrementally over a period of time?
Well, not an easy way. And I'm not aware of any community that allows people to do it, because let's just take the Rob's Garage example. It was really hard for you guys to revoke that guy's conditional use permit, because you're essentially telling a business, we don't want you to be in business anymore.
Lost the business.
And so, yes, you could say, oh, we're going to give you 2 years. But then at the end of 2 years, and if they don't pave it, which he didn't.
Well, he didn't own the building.
No, he didn't own
So,
the
I mean,
building.
that was, yeah.
But the
landlord
property
didn't
owner
do
was
it.
probably
Yeah.
never going to pave. It's still
No.
not paved.
Yeah.
And
it's
I mean,
empty.
it would
other
be
than
putting
storage.
yourselves in a bad position, because then you're really going to look anti-business if you start saying, well, you didn't pave, 2 years is up,
Yep.
you're out,
You're
we're
out.
going to just turn off your water. So, and I don't know any other way. It would be very difficult for us to track. We have a very small staff. So tracking all of those, making sure that they were, I think what you would end up with is we wouldn't track them and they still wouldn't pave and you'd be right where you are. So, you know, I don't see any benefit in it. And I know the city attorney doesn't want me to mention development agreements. Some communities do those, but again, then you have to take somebody to court to make them comply. Well, is that really what you want to do? And there's only one of Paul, so I don't think he wants to spend all his time taking people to court to enforce development agreements.
Well, it'd be an enforcement nightmare, Council.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the opportunity when they're first doing the project to make the requirements, see that they're enforced. But once a business is in there, once it's occupied, good luck with compliance, and you've seen how that works.
Yeah.
So you want to do it at the inception of the project.
Let's take the guy, the banquet hall out on wherever it is. You know, I gave him a year, right, to pave. I think he's going to find that women trotting up to his building in high heels on a gravel parking lot are going to be very unhappy. And over time, he will pave that simply to keep his clientele happy. And that kind of thing, I think, will happen. You know, Rob's Garage, they didn't care whether they were walking over gravel or dirt.
Right, because they had broken down cars there.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Women in high heels and fancy dresses, that's a whole different ballgame.
But that variance we provided allowed him to get that business.
Right. But,
Up
and
and
it gives him a
running.
year in which to get it done. So hopefully that will come to fruition.
Well, he'll not need to,
If
Need
this-
to,
assuming
if he chooses not to.
these are passed.
yeah.
And I would assume he'd come back and ask for that
To
to be
fall under the
removed
new
under the new
regulation.
regulation, yeah.
Actually, I think he'll end up doing it anyway, just simply because it is a customer service issue.
Yeah, the market
It'll
will probably
dictate.
drive a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know the answer to growth in this community. I mean, Jana, you made a really good point. Well, you know, a lot of those infill projects didn't happen when the paving requirements were a lot more liberal. But I think it's all just a big experiment. We don't know the answer, but I think this is a good start. And like anything, if we find that it's not helping, we can always change it. I think that's what we're here for, to try what we think is best for the community, review the consequences, go back, try again, review the consequences, go back, try again. Just always, you know, making those decisions based on the best information we have at hand, which is why in 2011, I'm sure that's why they were passed by other
Yeah.
councils. You know, they weren't doing it to impede business growth. They didn't know. You know, you don't know sometimes what the results are going to be, but I think this is a wonderful step in the right direction.
Oh, I want to read a paragraph out of the report you made to the planning department. Jade, you make good points, and I agree with them, but this is the one that keeps sticking in my mind that bothers me. But it says, Hutchinson, as a first-class city, has adopted paving and landscaping regulations that reflect an urban environment. Small towns or second and third-class cities with populations under 15,000 do not have similar standards because they do not have the same level of traffic as first-class cities. When people make the choice to move to small towns, they expect unpaved parking and minimal landscaping, as these are part of the existing makeup and fabric. For larger communities like Hutchinson, paving and landscaping are expected. They contribute to the quality of life in an urban setting. And when non-conforming properties don't have these standard features, cities require them when certain expansion triggers are met. And I didn't read that to argue against making changes, but that's what sticks with me. I hate to see us abandoning the move towards achieving what I consider a better quality of life in an urban setting when we'll have a lot more gravel parking lots or little, if any, change from gravel to paved. And in some meeting, and I forget which one it was, I even talked about smaller towns, and that was before I'd read this particular paragraph, and seeing few paved lots, all gravel, and just the different feel that had. And certainly there are benefits to living in a small town, in a more rural setting than what a town the size of Hutchinson offers. But that's what keeps coming back to me. And as I look at, not all, I think that most, the majority of the paving standard changes are good changes. The one where we will basically give up seeking to move to that quality of life in an urban setting, that's the one that bothers me. And it'll happen primarily in the older parts of town. And I know there's the balance, and what is the balance? And you make a good point talking about trying something. But it just bothers me, and it's what I continue to wrestle with every time I come to not the entire combination of changes, but certainly the one that has to do with moving towards increasing the amount of paved areas that we've got.
I personally make peace with it because, again, we said any new development is going to be paved. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't want people thinking that anybody can go willy-nilly with gravel or whatever. So anything new is going to have that. Anything substantially changed is going to have to do that as well. As it stands right now, status quo, those buildings are vacant. They're going to stay gravel. They're going to, so
Exactly.
they're not moving as it stands anyways. If this incentivizes, I think the market will dictate, customer service will dictate, depending on the type of business, whether or not it needs to be paved. Customer complaints will help with that. They seem to kind of do that. Would I rather see everything look pristine? Absolutely. And for the reasons you mentioned also, the rocks, the storms, sewer, all those things. But I'm hoping that this would allow for some development in those buildings and allow a tenant or a new business owner to maybe get themselves established and then possibly be able to, with all the upfront expenses to open a business, this will allow them some time to then maybe adhere to that later. And I think they'll want to if the business dictates it. But as it stands right now, I don't think anything's going to change with those vacant buildings.
I agree. It's too cost prohibitive in that part of town.
Right.
You're never going to get your money back. You're never going to be able to get a loan when your paving costs more than the repairs of the building.
The building itself.
So,
Business
I mean,
plan around that.
I read that same paragraph, Steve, and bristled because, I mean, I've lived here my whole life in the type of community in which I want to, stay in and raise my daughter. I want it. I'd love for it to look a certain way, and but do more of the same. We're going to get more of the same, which is not a whole lot of growth down there. So just something to try.
On parking, any other questions of Jana? I'm certain there's folks here today that may be interested in addressing the council. So on the issue of the parking regulation changes, is there anybody who wants to speak? Yes, please come forward, sir. Yes, up to the podium, please, and give us your name and address.
Actually didn't come to speak about this, but since it came up, I thought I would. My name is Brian Anderson, and I live at 1001 Barberry Drive. And I think you're making a move in the right direction. I would agree with some of the comments that we do want it to look pristine. We all want things to look nice, but the reality is you have to get in the mind of a business owner. When you start up, volume drives things, and if the volume's not there, it's very hard to afford some of those other things, such as the landscaping, the parking. I think the lesson that maybe needs to be looked at here is how much time do we really want to spend on controlling what others do? And I think there's a lot of common sense that can be missed when you look at what businesses do, what residences do. The reality is, as a business owner, which I'm not a business owner, but as a business owner, I don't think most business owners want to have a parking lot with potholes or a gravel parking lot. but the reality is in that cost. And the thing is, what would drive a business owner to do the right thing and have their property be in the best shape possible is you want business, right? You want to drive customers to your business. And you had a very good example there when you talked about the women walking across the lot in heels and such. Common sense dictates that if you want to compete and you want to have customers, you have to have good customer service, and your facility has to look nice, and you want to clean those things up. It's not government's job to tell that business how they should do their parking lots, how they should do their customer service, how they should do their landscaping. I know we want things to look good. I want things to look good too. I do. I really do. But it is their responsibility, and they will pay the price when they lose their customers. All things given, you have two businesses that are alike within shouting reach of each other. And if one is doing those things correctly, if they're providing good customer service, and if they're providing the amenities that attract those customers are going to be driven to that business. And so I want to thank you guys. I'll shorten it. I want to thank you for being willing to take a look at this and to make these changes to help development happen, because once they start driving those revenues, then they can look at those other things, and hopefully they'll want to clean those parking lots up and want to take care of landscaping. So anyway, not exactly what I wanted to say, but hopefully it gets to the point. I think you're making a move in the right direction, but please, please try to stay away from thinking that you know what's best for a person's business, because you don't. It's the business owner that has sweat equity, and you understand sweat equity. Sure. It's their business. If they lose it because of bad decisions, that's on them. There are other ways to keep them from affecting the city streets and things that you can do, but try to be careful of how much you do on their properties. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Is there a motion on the parking regulations?
I move to approve the ordinance amending Article 7 parking regulations of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I just want to comment, and a little bit goes to Mr. Anderson's. I'm not seeking to regulate how a business operates its business. I do believe, though, that as community, we have a responsibility to the greater community when it comes to, again, quality of life, aesthetics, that businesses do impact on. That's where I'm coming from. Not telling a business how to run its business, but as a business being in a community, I think that there is a responsibility, just as we all have as citizens, and that's just where I'm coming from. Anyway, my comment.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Linda, call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes?
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Foldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Might surprise you. Yes. Okay. Jana, can you talk to us about landscaping more thoroughly?
Presentation.
Thank you.
So in conjunction with paving standards, we also wanted to amend the landscaping. So I'll go through the summary of those. Right now we require, if it's not in building area or sidewalk or driveway or something like that, parking lot, that you have to be landscaped. And as you know, we have a point system. We're proposing that all parts of the property still be landscaped. Bare dirt would not be allowed, or weeds. But what we are proposing is that we expand the materials that can be used. Right now, you only get points for the most part, you only get points for living things. We're proposing that you can also use other types of landscaping materials, such as decorative rock, brick paver, small decorative fences, benches. So what we're proposing is to expand the types of materials you can use. But that 50% of your landscape area would still need to be living materials. So you can see here, there's this picture of some decorative rock with some plants in it. And that would be acceptable under the new code. Minimum, so rather than having the point system, we think using this minimum landscaped area will achieve essentially the same effect and allow more flexibility on the part of the developer or the property owner. So what we're proposing is, I'll start at the bottom there, C5, which is downtown, there be 0% required landscaping. Most of those properties are built all the way to the sidewalk. There's no place to put landscaping, although the Link is doing some creative plantings on balconies and terraces. In the I1, I'm sorry, on the I2, I3, AI, which is the airport and the public and institutional, that 10% of the lot be landscaping, a minimum. They can do more. In the I1, which is our light industrial, and the EN, it'd be 15%, and so forth, up to the R5, which is basically our apartment zoning, and the office and neighborhood commercial would be 30%. Those are uses that you would find typically either in the middle of a residential district or right next to one. So we felt like having a little higher standard in those places would make sense. And then residential are exempted, but they still have to put in landscaping. You're not allowed to have, bare grass.
Are those percentages changed from what we currently are under?
We don't have a percentage right
don't
now.
have percentages?
We have
Yeah,
a
this
table.
point system.
Yeah, the point system, okay.
Yeah.
What would it be though, if you were, I was struggling with how do we make it comparable? So especially like in the industrial areas, would the point system now require it to be more at like a 20% if we were to convert those to percentages?
It just depends, because right now in industrial, you have to put in parking lot landscaping. So you have to have parking lot islands, I believe. And you also have to put one tree every so many feet along the frontage. We're proposing actually to not even require the trees along the frontage unless they're on a major arterial. And so they can have turf. They can have grass and no other kind of plant, and they can meet their 10%.
I see, okay. Thank you, that's very
Yeah. Now, if but they can't have all just rock. So, we live in a part of the world, or a part of the country in the world, where we can't always rely on rain to keep our plants alive. And that's one of the big issues that we've struggled with for industrial developments particularly. Yeah. They're like, we don't want to run irrigation lines all the way out to the front to those trees, and so they argue with us about it. But now they would be able to put grass there, and grass pretty much stays alive. More so than trees, which require a little bit more water to get established. But yeah, and then we're not proposing that they can put it anywhere on their lot, unless they're along a major roadway or their parking lot is along along the front. Then they'd have to put some landscaping in front of the parking lot.
Which would include trees, or not necessarily?
Not
Wouldn't
necessarily.
have to.
Wouldn't have to.
Be
Unless they were
the
on
combination of
a
live
major roadway.
and non-living. Okay.
Right. So, to answer I didn't catch his name, the gentleman who came and spoke. I see this as a move towards, you're the business owner, you're the property owner. We're just going to tell you have to landscape, but you pick. You pick how you do it. It just has to be landscaped. And we want to have some green stuff out there. We don't want to just have all rock. It's sort of the thing that we've heard from our applicants is, well, why do I have to have a tree? The existing developments, a lot of those are going to be fine because a lot of them do have big trees already. They have landscaping. Unless there's a few places on East 4th that don't have one plant. but most of them have some landscaping already.
Right now it dictates how many shrubs, how many trees, how many flowers.
Oh, yeah.
And some have to be evergreen and percentages of this and that and where. It's very complicated right now.
But realistically, somebody could put in rock and a bunch of yucca and meet the.
They could.
Yeah, meet the criteria.
So if you guys wanted more than that, we'd have to figure out how to get that.
Well, and also the more they to go back to the incentive piece, wouldn't that not help on the stormwater offset?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, if you put, well, green's going to help.
Sure.
Even rock will help,
Right.
decorative rock.
And,
So,
and a decision that the business owner can make, if that really affects his bottom line, he may choose to throw down more grass seed or.
yeah, because we're not going to require as much paving, and I didn't mention that, but our paving requirements are going to be some of the most liberal. They're going to match Lawrence's, which are some of the most liberal in the state. So you're not going to see people building parking spaces they don't need.
No more than they need, yeah.
No more than they need.
Right.
And so
Which is
then I think we're going to actually see more landscaped area, because they have to put something there.
Right.
So.
And if you could see a cost benefit for, knocking off some of that
Right.
fee, that might be
Right.
incentive
Get rid of
enough.
the asphalt.
Yeah.
Again, this is a guess. I mean, we might have to come back and tweak it, because we couldn't really find a city that had something good that we wanted to copy. So,
You are going to be breaking new ground.
yes. We do propose the same exemptions that would fall under the paving, and that is existing developments would be exempt. Even if they require a CUP or SUP, or, I don't know why our current code has lot reconfiguration. I'm not sure why that was something that required triggered landscaping, but we wouldn't, we're not proposing that if you're already there, you're Dairy King, you have 3 trees, you can still be Dairy King and have 3 trees when it goes out and comes back into business. And then on the expansions, 30% or more. So if you are going to build a 30% expansion, then you need to have a landscaped area. And this is a change. We kind of felt like, since there was quite a bit of movement on the percentage from the existing point table, that we don't want to give everything up, right? So this is a proposed change, and the groups by and large agreed with us that along arterials, expressways, and the gateway corridor, that street trees would be required. So if you're building something new and you don't meet one of those exemptions, that you'd have to plant street trees every 40 feet along your frontage. So, over time, we should get our main corridors looking more like this. And then screening, to answer your question, John, we were not proposing to do away with the screening, but to do away with the fact that you had to, right now our screening says you have to put up a fence, and then you have to put plantings along the fence on the commercial side. Well, we're just proposing to take away the requirement to have plantings along that fence. They're not really helping the people on the other side. And on your side, if you just want to put up a fence, that's all you should need to do. Plus, it's kind of difficult to keep those watered. You have to put a sprinkler there. The sprinkler damages the fence. So, I mean, people can, but we're proposing not to require that. They could still use the evergreen screens that we allow now.
Okay.
And then this is an area that we've struggled with, and we're proposing to kind of make it more flexible. And this is where a parking area buffers abuts a sidewalk or a right-of-way. That there be at least a 3-foot wide landscaping strip. And right now we have the same requirement, but you have to put a hedge. We're proposing to allow some other things that could go in there: decorative fencing and turf or ornamental grasses, boulders that are decorative. Kind of just going with the whole scheme of, let's allow some flexibility. We still don't want your cars hanging over this public sidewalk or into the street, your parking lot, but giving people a wider array of things that they can use for that buffering. And I want to mention the bioswales at the bottom. Those are actually things that can give you credits on your stormwater. They're designed to take flows from your parking lot and treat them before they enter the storm drain system, or sometimes just completely, they never enter the storm drain system. So that's the technique that a lot of places that have water issues like us are starting to use. And then parking lot landscaping, This is another one that if you get a major developer out there who comes in with a lot of money, they're fine to do it, but we've struggled, and you guys know it, even with the sports arena. People didn't want to put those in. So what we're proposing is that we encourage it rather than require it, and that you get a credit for every island you put in. There's a table here. So if you put in, if you're required to have less than 10 spaces, no credit. If you're required to have 10 to 20 spaces, you would get a 4-space credit for every island, 200 square foot island you put in, but the maximum credit would be 4 spaces. We quickly realized that we couldn't give so many credits that you didn't have to put any parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're thinking this will work. It's about basically a 20% credit. And so if people are willing to put in, parking lot landscaping, I think we say that you have to have 1 tree in it, then they will get credits on the amount of required parking spaces.
Is there a point where the parking lot is small enough that under existing, you wouldn't need to put in a?
Well, it's not going to be triggered on existing. This is just all new development.
Yes, or expansion over 30%.
Right.
But is there a point where the parking lot is small
Under
enough
10
that
spaces.
under 10? So
Yeah.
10 or more spaces currently.
Well, currently, no. We count everything. So currently, every space has to be within 75 feet of a tree.
Okay.
And so the way that works out is if you have a parking lot that's of any size, you're going to have to put parking lot islands in because you can't cover it with trees along the perimeter. So Dillon's, Target, of course, they built before these regulations, but Target Kohl's, that's why they have those islands in there, is because their parking lot's too big. This is a kind of the same idea, but just we'll give you credit. We'll tell you you don't have to have these 4 extra spaces we're saying you need if you put an island in.
Do those islands kind of eat those 4 spaces anyway, so to speak?
200 square feet. So our parking space size is 9 by 18, which that's
162.
162? Okay.
Wow.
So no,
Impressive.
you're actually getting a bonus. 2
Okay.
spaces. They would eat up 2 spaces.
Gotcha. Okay. But I still consider it a double whammy because you less to pave, and then a credit against the stormwater fee.
And against your
and less
total,
Yeah.
impervious surface as well, so you kind of reap it twice.
I mean,
on that
don't
one.
get me wrong, I love the islands.
Sure.
There's a lot of reasons to promote them. They provide shade, and it gets really hot here. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but at the end of the day, they're very tough to maintain. And so what we're hoping is that, businesses will see the benefit and they'll realize them by a real cost savings and then be willing to maintain them. Mechanical equipment screening require only if visible from the public street right of way. So if it's behind your building, you don't have to screen it. An exemption for existing buildings. So I keep using Dairy King, but he's really recent. He wouldn't have to screen it just because he's going back into business. And then an exemption for industrial zoning districts. Typically, those are very large lots. They don't usually put industrial buildings right up next to the street. And depending upon what they're doing or making or building, they could have a lot of units on their roof. It could be very pricey for them to screen. So that's what we're proposing.
And I would argue most industrial folks probably don't care, so
Yeah.
to speak. I mean, they're just used to it. It's an industrial area. There's a certain expectation of what it might look like or whatever.
Dumpster screening, we had actually tossed out there the idea to kind of do away with some of it or allow it to be more flexible. And the groups we spoke to said, no, we like the dumpster screening. Even having like a fencing, see-through fence, like a chain link fence, they were not supportive of because they said, well, what happens is pieces of trash get stuck in those holes in the fence and the fence falls over. But what we are proposing that it cannot be placed in the front yard setback. So Typically, like in a C4 zone, that's the first 25 feet. You can put it in front of your building, you just can't put it in the setback. And it needs to be shown on the site plan. And then we're proposing to take away the irrigation. We had a lot of things about types of bubblers and spigots, and we're not trained in that. Planners aren't. And so we really didn't even know how to enforce it. So we're just proposing that they note on their plans how they plan to irrigate. And then a timing submittal. The landscape plans should come with a site plan application or whatever planning application they have. Right now our code says that the building permit, well, that's a little too late, because if they don't have enough landscaping, they might have to totally reconfigure their site, which would result in delays for them. So we're not about resulting in delays. And then installation, the timing of installation, we propose requiring it within 365 days of the issuance of a temporary occupancy permit. Right now our code says that we can take a letter of credit, but we've never done it. And so we just feel like, well, they have a year. They should be able to get their landscaping in. They won't get their final occupancy permit without it. And then subdivision buffers, we're proposing that we take these out of the zoning regulations. They really belong in the subdivision regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And when we move them there, which we're not proposing to do today, but when they are moved there, that we remove the requirement to have plantings along them. The developers have told us that they can't get water to those plantings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the houses aren't sold, the lots aren't developed, and so we're adding on a lot of expense. Whereas a wall like this looks perfectly fine. I mean, in my view.
Will that area between the wall and the street need to be in turf?
Yeah, I mean, grass or
Yeah, grass, right?
of some sort. Yeah, and I think that'll happen in here naturally. I don't know, most places grow grass, but as far as we have a requirement to have so many plantings of such size so far apart, and we've heard from developers that that's just not very reasonable, and they can't keep the plants alive. And then minimum species diversity, we're not proposing any, but that they combine living and non-living materials. And then I talked about the point system, and here's just a little snippet of, you know, of how our current system works, but we're proposing to do away with that. So that's all I had for the landscaping.
That's plenty.
Yeah, right.
Good.
Sorry.
No.
Well, I think elimination of the point system is outstanding.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
that's the key right there.
Jen, of the 365 days to get your landscaping installed, are we, what is it currently? What's it called? What's called for currently?
Well, currently they're supposed to have it done at the time of occupancy, I believe. I think we can, if the occupancy is in the winter, we can take a letter of credit or some kind of guarantee. But we have never required that letter of credit or guarantee, and since the code changed, I just feel like it was so different from what we've done that they just never did it. And so when I came here, we weren't requiring that.
Mm-hmm.
This matches basically current practice.
Okay.
It doesn't match current code, it matches current practice.
And under current practice, that's worked satisfactorily?
Yeah,
Have we,
yeah,
we've
because
not had folks who drug it on to whatever, a year and a half, 2 years?
Usually they need something, their lenders are requiring that final occupancy permit.
Right,
So,
they don't get that.
That's how we usually
So you'll
get
still
them.
need it by final occupancy?
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah, so we only issue the temporary, which lets them get in the building. But usually a lender's not gonna hold open a loan for very long without having the final occupancy permit.
That's your carrot.
I mean, it's not been a problem.
You made the comment yourself. I hate to see the parking lot islands go away. Not saying that they will go away, but I just you know, I think of Target, or I think of
Kmart.
Kmart or any number of places, and boy, I hate to risk. And what'll happen is if we find out that the incentive is not working at all, we'll have that many more large, and I'm not thinking of the smaller ones, 10, 20 spaces, 30 spaces.
I mean,
But
you could, this just occurred to me, but you could say if your parking lot is over, well, you guys pick the number of spaces that you must put in the parking lot landscaping. And
Right.
I don't know how you decide how many. That would be something we probably have to come back with, or they'd have to come back with, but.
I sure do like that
I
idea.
can't think of something, I can't think of what would be appropriate right here at the podium.
Well, and I think the point is we're not the big outfits, the Dillenses of the world, the Targets of the world. They have the wherewithal to do it. The people we're trying not to hinder from growth are the small groups. So if we did set a size parameter or whatever, then that would it wouldn't disincentivize the smaller group from starting up.
Right.
I don't know.
You know, I think of the smaller restaurants. They'd probably easily have 20 or 30 parking spaces.
Well, but look at
And I
Olive
don't know
Garden.
that they need to necessarily have parking islands or have the landscape islands. But I am thinking of the Dillons, the Kmarts, the big ones.
And some of that can be handled with design. Our current code does allow it to be handled with design. So, for instance, Olive Garden, they don't have any parking islands, but they have
landscaping.
all around,
Good-
and
good
they have
example,
those trees.
yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe you just don't monkey with it and see where you end up, and then come back if it's a problem.
You know, personally, I think the days of the big box store, the huge parking lot, I think that's done. I don't think we're going to see that like we have in the past. They're going to be smaller constructions than what we have had it previously. So I think it's going to solve itself, personally.
Yeah. It's kind of silly to build a parking lot for Black Friday type shopping requirements.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the year it's
Yeah, and it's empty.
quarter full. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not so confident. I would ask you all to consider maybe holding off on the landscaping island and asking staff to put together some thoughts that would address, even if they never happen, so be it. That's great. But the large parking lots that are just an expansive space. I think a good example is where Planet Fitness now sets. Now that space was built many years ago, but that isn't the size of parking lot of, say, Kmart, Walmart, etc. But it sure would be nice if that wasn't just a flat run of asphalt or concrete.
What's really nice is that there's a viable business in there after like a decade.
Definitely.
You know, so I think that's the balance. Yeah, I get it. I hate the whole Kmart style and what that does to the aesthetic of that corridor. I wouldn't be completely opposed to that as long as the threshold was high enough to not impact a lot of businesses. I just don't want it to work in the opposite.
And I'm okay. I agree with that.
But I think overall, this is a really great balance,
Yeah,
Jana,
it
that
is.
the group struck. I mean, it's a really good balance between what's, best for the community and what's best for a business. I know it took a tremendous amount of work to get to this point, and I think that it's a really good balance.
I might recommend that you go ahead and approve it and then direct staff to work on that one little piece. Because, it's not like we have 100 developments in the pipeline that are going to take advantage of this. And I feel like within the next 6 months or so, they could come back and just amend that little piece of it. I wouldn't want to hold off on all the amendments for just one piece that you're.
No, and that was my intent. I didn't want to, I'd like some mechanism of looking at that piece, whether it's approval without that one or approval with the direction to work on that particular piece.
Yeah,
We're
I'd
already
be
working on it.
comfortable with that. Yeah.
Currently.
Other questions of Jana? Janet, anything else to add at this point? Anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council? John?
Good morning, I'm John Richardson. I live at 3401 Radcliffe Terrace here in Hutchinson. My brother and I operate Richardson Brothers Construction here in town, and we do primarily new construction. We don't do a lot of rehab. And I'd like to speak to how some of these changes would impact infill, possibly the tax base in the city of Hutchinson. And I'm excited about it more as a citizen than I am a contractor, because it really doesn't affect me a lot, other than a few things on new construction in regards to parking lot sizes, landscaping requirements, things like that. The discussion, and I'm going to talk about some of the parking too, because I didn't realize we were really going to take a vote on that and move on to this one. But what I'm really excited about is what it does for infill. We talked about when we used to have the 50% rule, we didn't have a lot of things going on, but it also, if you do this special use or conditional use permit, you have to make the changes also. So if you bought a property and changed the use and it requires a special or conditional use permit, currently you have to bring it up to current standards. What this does is it allows the people that are concentrating on economic development to have conversations with people that are looking at other communities, and they can say, well, the usual things, sales tax, property tax, and yeah, but you want to expand, you want to refit this place. Here's what Wichita does. They're going to require you to bring it up landscaping and paving requirements just because you have 50% renovation. We don't require that. Buy the property, move in, get it to building code standards, start your business. And like with any other business, if you're competing against someone else, you're going to want it to look nice and attractive and be useful here for your customers. So I really like where we're going on the parking lot requirements. As far as landscaping requirements, I really do like this idea in regards to lower percentages, especially in the industrial park, because that's kind of where my type of product lives at, is industrial park areas. I've had, even though it won't affect me a whole lot, I've had 2 projects in the last year and a half that I probably would have gotten with the new requirements. One gentleman actually sold his facility on East 4th, auctioned it off because there was going to be a negative return on investment with the requirements he was going to have to meet. He just walked away and auctioned his building off. And the other gentleman owns a building out in the industrial park, and again, the return on investment wasn't there to try to meet the current requirements. He could have asked for a variance, but it was more of a budget rather than an ability on his part. And with the budget, it's 40% higher just to bring his current facility up to standards. Not making things worse than they were. If anything, we're making improvements. We're not asking for less asphalt paving. You have to meet or do better than what we currently have with the vacant spaces out there. In regards to the screening, what people don't realize is a lot of the buildings we end up doing in the industrial park, the air conditioners are on top, and they're large. So you end up with a screen that might be 5 or 6 feet tall, and it's 20 feet long and 15 feet wide. And you're looking at snowdrift loads, wind loads, weight, and that adds to the cost and the structural engineering on the building. If you're trying to rehab a building and you have to bring it up to that current standard and has a rooftop air conditioner, you're adding all those loads on a building that wasn't designed for that in the first place. So it's kind of a hidden cost people don't really think about. But anyway, I just wanted to point those things out. It's exciting to me. I think it gives our commercial realtors and economic development people a little bit of ammunition when they talk to companies that are looking at the mid-Kansas area, and you compare us, and that table would be perfect. You put that table together? Well, you put a lot of time into it, so I appreciate that. It's great, because then, hey, here's how we compare. We might have a little bit of a property tax and sales tax deal, but you get this. And if you're thinking of starting a business, that flexibility up front could be a big deal. So. anyway, those are my opinions.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, John.
Anyone else? Janet, any closing remarks?
No.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the ordinance amending section 27-098 landscaping requirements of chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion, council? Call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Yes?
Pyrus de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Let's take a 10-minute break,
Okay.
and we'll pick up. I'm just having the same thought.
Coffee all around.
So,
You ready to go? Let's reconvene then.
Yep, close enough.
Jenna?
The next one on the agenda is our Article 10 site plan. And this one's really easy. We're just basically matching it, changing it to meet the other changes, the 30% thresholds, as well as to match current practices.
okey-dokey.
Any questions? Discussion?
Just a question, clarification, if I'm in the right area here, the Development Review Committee, that's part of all this.
Yes, yes.
My question is that, is there ability for the applicant or a designated representative, general contractor, to attend the Development Review Committee
Absolutely.
to provide input? They're allowed to attend.
Yeah, that was one of the changes you guys asked for during your study session, so we've implemented that. Also, we have something that a lot of people don't know about, I guess, is a pre-submittal analysis. So anybody can ask us for free to do an analysis of what their code requirements from the planning side would be. And so, and the Development Review Committee looks at those as well. But yes, they're allowed to attend.
Okay, and do you notify them?
Yes.
You notify, and typically who would you notify?
We started that in June, so.
Pardon me?
We just started
You
that
just
in
started,
June.
good, very good. And who do you notify?
The, whoever the applicant is.
All right, very good. Okay, good. Thank you, that's good. Good to understand that.
Any other questions?
Anything else of Jana? Anybody want to speak to this? I wouldn't
guess so either.
Didn't expect any. Is there a motion?
I will move to approve the ordinance amending Article 10, site plan review of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas. Authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Jana?
Okay, I think this next one has to do with the administrative adjustments and conditional use permits and special use permits. So we changed the language for conditional use permits and special use permits to add in the exemptions that you guys have already talked about. And then administrative adjustment would be something new that we don't have presently in our regulations. And this was recommended actually when we were working on the signs. The sign company told us that Wichita has something called administrative adjustment. And we talked to them and thought it was actually sounded pretty good. So here's how we're proposing it would work. All the things that you could get an adjustment for are spelled out in the code. So if you come into the counter and you want to get an adjustment for something that's not in the code, you can't. The application would be filed and with the city, and then we would give you a sign to put in your yard for 10 days. And we'd probably go by and make sure that the sign was there. If we got no concerns from the public regarding the pending zoning, then we could just approve that exception, that adjustment at the counter. There would be a small fee for it. I talked to Wichita, like I said, they have this tool, and they said it works very well for them. They have about 3 of these every 2 weeks. It keeps people from, like the problem with code is it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. And the only tool we have to be able to bend it is a variance, which is a very lengthy process. Takes about 2 months. It has to, cost money. We require a survey for it. And so this would be a little bit less obtrusive, and it's for minor things. So we wouldn't be proposing that you could get like a 20 feet setback adjustment. But for minor things that would allow more flexibility in the code to acknowledge that every lot's not created the same.
Yeah, just give a quick example, Jen.
Yeah, let me go to that section because I don't want to give one that's not accurate. Okay, here. Okay, so setback. We could adjust the required front, side, or rear setback for the main structure by 20%. Up to 20%. So if the setback's 20 feet we could go up to 4 feet,
Okay.
if I did the math right.
And just put a sign and,
It'll say zoning pending and have a phone number
yeah.
for them to
Okay.
call. Yeah, because you really, we're going to invest in some signs and have our phone number on there. And then if we don't get any calls, then they could be approved.
Okay.
Is it, if I'm reading this correctly, there's 6 different allowable ones: setback, maximum height, lot coverage, parking, accessory structures, and signs would be the
Yeah.
allowable.
So it wouldn't be for uses. And
Yeah.
that would be way outside of what anybody's code would do. But for small things where, the lot's just not the right size or not the right shape, or there's some kind of existing condition, like, oh, my building's already sitting this close to the property line, we would be able to potentially, if they fit within the criteria, approve the adjustment at the counter.
Okay.
Well, not right at the counter, but with the proper notice. I was a little concerned because you don't really want to not have something that doesn't have notice. So having the sign in the yard, I thought was a good idea. And then if you read through there, we talk about, somebody who was reasonably affected. So I'm sorry, David, if you see something way across town and you call in, we're going to say, well, where do you live?
Right.
No, you're not really affected by this person's 2-foot setback.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Jana, this is such a good idea. This is going to save business owners so much time on their projects.
We think it will. For example, we did a variance for Prairie Land Partners for their height. It was a 1-foot variance. We could have done this.
Yeah.
And it would have saved them time. So a lot of sign variances are usually pretty small. They could fall under this.
Yes, this is a good addition.
So I think that is the only one that's in Article 5. The exceptions would be then in the next article.
So the administrative adjustments is related to what's labeled as motion 4.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of Jana? Is there anyone wishing to speak to this? Seeing none, is there a motion from the council?
I would move to approve ordinance amending Article 5, conditional use, special use permits of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve. Is there any further discussion? Linda, call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Yes?
Iris De Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckard.
Yes. Jana, I think the last item, right?
Well, and
Or did
master
we
fee
cover, or did
schedule.
we cover that as well? We did, didn't we?
No, we didn't do
No.
the master fee schedule. I'll come back to it.
Oh, okay.
But this one is the exception. So when I talked to Wichita, they said, well, if they can't meet the administrative adjustment, then we tell them they can go apply for a variance. But the principal planner there, Dave Uraut, has been a planner in Kansas for, I think, more than 40 years. He said the variance really isn't the right tool, but they don't have in their code what would be the right tool, which is an exception. We already had an exception in our code, which we had kind of use as a special use permit. But what we're proposing is just to kind of change the language a little bit and actually make an exception as a separate instrument. And the proposal is that, okay, the reason why he said variance isn't the right tool is because those criteria are spelled out in state statute, and they're very stringent.
Yeah.
The exception criteria, and they're in your proposed regulations, they would be a lot more, I don't know if flexible is the right word. They're a lot less difficult to meet. So example, stability and integrity of underlying zoning districts, conservation of property values, the protection against fire and casualties. If you can meet these different things, but not have, as an example, under variance, one of the criteria is it cannot be caused by an action that the property owner themselves created. Well, that's very hard to create, to find, when usually they're wanting a variance from something that they're wanting to do, you know. So we feel like these criteria are a lot more broad, and that this would give the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the ability to say, well, okay, yes or no, but you still have to meet criteria, but, you know. So that's what we're proposing, is that, and you could only get to this if you had an administrative adjustment that wasn't approved.
So this would be a second step, so to speak, to
Right.
administrative adjustment,
Right.
and then formally requesting exception.
Let's just say I want to do an administrative adjustment. I want to add on to the front of my building by 4 feet. I'm sitting 20 feet from the where my required setback's 20, and I want to go 4 feet into it. And I have a neighbor that just doesn't get along with me. They don't like my dog. And I know you know that never happens, but it really does. So they call in and they make up all these things about me, about why this shouldn't happen. And so staff, in an administrative adjustment, would have to say, sorry, we can't approve it. They're an impacted party, and, you know, we just can't approve it. This would allow them to be able to have some kind of appeal for the mean neighbor thing. And then we would notify people within 200 feet. And if there's just one person, and then the board has the ability to say, yeah, we hear your complaint, but, you know, we looked at the rest of the block, and, you know, we don't see how this is any big deal.
I also think this is another mechanism. It provides another mechanism for people who are concerned that, oh, the city isn't giving me what I want. And so, well, you know, if you think we're being unreasonable, there is another outlet
Right.
for you to have a hearing.
Okay, now, quick question, Janet. When, like, the Board of Zoning Appeals, if they turn down a request, it can go to court,
Yes.
right? Would the exception be able to go to court as well?
Yeah, they'd have to go to court.
Okay.
I think it'd be really tough.
Okay.
Well, it'd probably be tough on a variance or an exception, because really, the person that was complaining would have to prove that we didn't follow our code, that we
Okay.
didn't follow the criteria.
Okay.
So that's why staff is so careful. You know, when we make the recommendations, we're like, well, I know you like this project, but
Yeah,
it has to meet the criteria.
got it.
One of the items talks about said actions final, but reapplication can be made 1 year later or more. Why?
Well, that's pretty standard language in our code.
All right.
We usually don't see people come back, but
You might have
this would make them have to wait at least a year before they did come
They
back.
reapply for the,
Yeah.
okay.
They're really serious about it, huh?
maybe it's discussed in there, but those on the Board of Appeals, what's the term length?
Well, they have a 3-year term, plus they can be reappointed for another 3-year term. So 6 years. And most of our planning commissioners, Board of Zoning Appeals members do the full 2 terms.
Well, they're pretty much the same,
They're,
aren't they?
they're
They
the
are the
same
same
body.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it states. is
Yeah,
they're
they are the same body.
Yeah.
Same body.
Just different hat. So. You ready?
Any other questions of Jana?
I think I know the answer, but just clarification. Again, in order to get to the appeal process, you have to be able to go through the adjustment, or excuse me, what was the wording for the one?
Oh,
where-
through the administrative adjustment.
Administrative
So
adjustment.
you can't just come in the counter and say, I want an exception.
Right.
Well, okay, first that has to be one of these things that you guys have said, we're okay with staff making adjustments on.
Right.
And then, you know, hopefully most of those people will be able to be handled under the adjustment.
Adjustment.
But if there's just an odd case where it can't be handled,
If it doesn't fit within the criteria of the adjustment, does that constitute that it could be
a
sent to the
variance.
Board of Appeals?
Usually through a variance.
Okay.
So let's just say that they need a setback variance, but it's way more than what you guys have said we could do administratively. It would just go straight to the variance.
Okay. Okay, I think I get it.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
It's an extra thing in here. You know, again, we want to try it, see how it works. They may end up having to tweak it a little bit.
Well, I think we've had some cases, for example, on residences and side yard setbacks that come to my mind, at least, that the adjustment could be utilized for.
Yeah.
And I think even some front yard setback or line of sight kind of things.
We do have some things in our code that can help us, but yeah, this is another tool.
Yep, exactly. Anything else, council? Anybody in the audience wish to speak to this issue? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move to approve the ordinance amending Article 11, Board of Zoning Appeals of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Linda, call roll, please.
Dave Lang.
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Next item.
Item 6C, consider resolution amending the master fee schedule pertaining to administrative adjustments, exceptions, and signs.
And I apologize, I don't have a slide for this, but what this would be is establishing the charges for the administrative adjustment and for the exceptions. The exception would be the same as a variance. Administrative adjustment, I think we put $50 for the first one, and then if you had some same adjustments on the same development project, they'd be less. And then we also needed to fix the master fee schedule for our signs. We didn't do that back in January. Just kind of slipped away from us, honestly. So this is a little cleanup work on the signs. Same cost, just we have different categories, so we want to make sure our categories, our ordinance matches the fees.
Questions of Jana? Is there a motion?
I will move to accept a resolution proposing amendments to the master fee schedule and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Lang.
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes.
And if you would humor me for 2 more slides. I did want to provide an update on the development committee recommendations and the study session that we had. So landscaping and parking amendments are complete. The brochures, we mailed out fence and shed brochures to local contractors in late June. I actually got some positive response from them. So we're working on our websites. Education is ongoing. The use table, we held a study session on June 26th with the Planning Commission. I think that they're hoping to bring that back to this body towards the end of August. We have opened up the DRC meetings to applicants. And then the one thing that I can't really just talk to you about, I need to show you, is we did look at the industrial setbacks for our comparison cities. And you'll see that those range from 0 feet in Topeka to 50 feet, 40 to 50 feet in Lawrence. Ours is 0 to 30, depending upon what type of road type. I don't think ours are really out of line with any place else, and it would be my recommendation that we not change those. Especially since we now have added a lot more tools to the toolbox.
Yeah.
For sure.
So just wanted to provide you with that, and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Going out with a bang, Jana.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no whimper in this
Yeah.
these items. Thank you very much, Jana.
Wish you
Thank
well
you.
in your future endeavors as well.
It was John's wish that since he couldn't be here today, that we publicly thank Jana for all the great work and all the great years she's given to the city of Hutchinson. So please join me in thanking her.
Jana, you will be missed.
For
Thank-
sure.
Thank
To-
you.
to
I'm glad
second
you're
what-
staying in Hutch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who knows? We might call on you.
Yep.
Okay. Next item.
Item 7A, consider Prairie Star 2 final plat.
Good morning, Amy Allison, Senior Planner. It's a little foreign, but
Suit you.
Thank you. All right, so I will be presenting the final plat for Prairie Star 2 subdivision for you guys today. There we go. The property in question is owned by Prairie Star Health Center, Inc., and the agent is Dan Garber with Garber Surveying, who has waited patiently for this, so thank you. The property in question today is currently what is Prairie Star addition to the city of Hutchinson and 2 unplatted lots to the west. And what's kind of necessitating this plat is the applicant, or Prairie Star, the owner, has acquired the 2 west lots and they'd like to expand their current facility. Since it's unplatted, they need to go through the plat process, so this will be the final step for them. All right, all 3 properties are currently zoned CR, which is our commercial residential zoning districts within the city. And their comprehensive plan land use designation is commercial, so that meets the criteria for the proposed use that they're wanting to expand. As you can see, this is the utilities map. The lots are adequately provided by sewer and water, so no public infrastructure is needed for this project at this time. And this is the final final plat. There are 2 lots being proposed for this plat. Lot 1 is the very large lot where the existing facility is, and lot 2 is a separate lot kind of there in the center of the plat. There's an existing building that the applicant would like to keep, so our recommendation was that it needed to be on its own separate lot. Kind of 2 major changes from Prairie Star subdivision to the Prairie Star 2 is there was a trail easement kind of on the southeast corner of the lot that was going to, or was proposed to be added on the Prairie Star edition for the fact that the new Orchard Park is located to the north of this property, and there was maybe some idea that eventually there could be a trail that would go up through that point. However, ownership of the lot in between this lot and that park has changed, and so there's really no plans to add a trail at this point. So with the approval of the Director of Parks and Facilities, we allowed them to remove that easement just because there was no plans. Also, another change to the plat is the easement going kind of the center there. It's a sanitary sewer easement. The proposed addition would actually extend, be built over that easement, and with the approval with the Department of Engineering, they were allowed to truncate that and vacate part of the easement with this replatting period. The only facility being serviced by the sanitary sewer is Prairie Star, so there's really nobody that would be adversely affected by that vacation. That's kind of with the as mentioned in the staff report, this plat does meet all the requirements of the subdivision regulations, so staff didn't have any other comments on it. Again, there's that lot 2, just so you guys know where it is. It does have public access, so it does meet our requirements. And then just some photos of the property. This is the existing facility. This kind of is looking all along the property line of what will be between lot 1 and lot 2 on the east boundary line of lot 2. The addition will also kind of extend into this area a little bit. This is the existing structure that will remain on lot 2. This is the access to the public right-of-way for lot 2. The preliminary plat and final plat were considered by the Planning Commission on June 26, 2018. There were no comments from the public, and they voted to approve both plats by a vote of 8-0. So that kind of concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me, happy to answer them. Also, the applicant.
No substantial changes to ingress and egress?
No.
Okay.
Other questions of Amy? Dan, would you like to add anything?
Good morning, Council. Dan Garber with Garber Surveying, 2908 North Plum. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Bryant Anderson, who spoke to you earlier, is the CEO of Prairie Star Health Center and meant to be here for this in case you had any questions of him, but he had another commitment he needed to go to. I think Amy's done a great job of presenting the plat. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stand for those. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Anything to close? Nope.
Recommendation. So staff recommends approval of the plat as presented.
Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the Planning Commission recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the final plat for Prairie Star 2 subdivision.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, council? Call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Yes?
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Next item.
Item 7B, consider Fenn Valley Observation Deck recommendations.
Good morning. I'm Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. This item, even though we're saying Fun Valley Observation Deck restoration, it's really exterior renovation of the primary structure at Fun Valley. On June 22nd, we received proposals, and I'll walk through a little bit of the scope of the work to be done for the building. First, and kind of the primary function of this was to prevent the further rusting or deterioration of the steel structure of that building. So all the exposed steel elements will be sandblasted, cleaned, and painted. Also the roof deck, so the underside of the deck that you're looking at there, the white with the peeling paint, will also be cleaned and painted. We'll also replace some of the existing steel element structures that are no longer structurally sound. We've identified approximately 100 feet of steel that will need to be replaced. We may, as we sandblast, we may find more, so we do have kind of a linear foot price for that, but right now we're estimating about 100 feet of steel that needs to be replaced. Again, just more views of the current condition of the building. I'm sure everybody's been out there. It's in pretty rough shape. Several years ago, or not several, 2 years ago, we put a new roof on the main building, and really the goal is to seal the building up itself. Even though these are exposed, if we can get the water preventing from coming down through the structure, hopefully we can at least slow down some of the rust. So before we could paint, which was always a priority, we wanted to re-roof the building. We'll also be replacing this perimeter fence that's around that second story observation deck. Part of that's aesthetic, because right now it's just a galvanized chain link. We will go back with a PVC coated, so a nicer looking chain link fence. But also we were going to have to remove that fence anyway to do some restoration work to the concrete on that second deck. So the picture on the right is just a picture of a typical crack and some spalding that we're seeing on that upper deck. So that's on the second story around the restaurant and bar area. So again, as an attempt to seal up the building, we need to seal those cracks and fix the spalding concrete, and then we'll apply basically a paint, or a traffic coat is another word for it. So it's a two-part epoxy paint on that concrete to try to seal it up to prevent water from getting down into the structure from the top, which is leading to a lot of the rust and decay that we're seeing. The picture on the left is actually on the ground level, so you can see there's a steel member that comes down there. So areas like that, we'll go ahead and patch that concrete, clean it up a little bit. The bottom level will not receive that same traction coat, but the cracks in the spalling areas will get repaired. Again, more just pictures, kind of typical what that upper deck looks like. Why we're seeing so much rust on that steel underneath is because we've got water penetrating that upper deck, getting into the steel. So these are all areas, all those cracks will be sealed, and then we'll get that traction coat. The stairs will also be addressed. So the picture on the right, we'll look at that same coating on the steps as well. So we did receive bids on June 22nd. We did only receive one bid from Ward Davis Builders. His bid was for $793. We've got a great relationship with Ward Davis. He's done a lot of work for the city of Hutch. His bid is actually lower than I was expecting. Two-ish years ago, I received bids just to paint So just to sandblast and paint just the steel and the roof deck. And those bids were $167,000. So that did not include any of the concrete work, replacing any steel, any of the fencing. So at 217 is actually a little lower than what I was anticipating. So even though we did only get the one bid, I'm confident it's a solid bid. Ward asked a lot of questions. He spent a lot of time with Sean. Sean was one who worked very heavily on this project. And so I'm very comfortable with Ward on this project. So we do recommend awarding the contract to Ward Davis for amount not to exceed $217,793. Jeez. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Justin, you indicated that the roofing material had been replaced a couple of years ago.
Correct.
What, other than that, is this the first significant work ever, or at least in quite some long time that's been done for that?
It's been a few years since we've done some work out there. We have last year we brought in 2 of the fields from adult softball length to.
I was thinking the building itself.
To the building.
The building itself.
Yes, to the building itself. We did add a new sound system 2 years ago, which was much needed.
As far as the structural or
as far as structural, we've done some interior. Hutch Rec has done some interior work to the concession stand and to the second story restaurant, and so just some minor things they've done.
So I know overdue then, isn't it?
It is, and I know the biggest complaint we get is the restrooms. So I do want to address that. In 2020, we have $250,000 budgeted right now in the CIP to really gut and replace all 4 restrooms on the main structure. And talking with architects, local architects, when we started this project, that's what I wanted to accomplish, was to get the restrooms. But their concern was with the building itself, that if we don't salvage the building, if we don't stop the water, if we don't put a roof on it, if we don't seal this upper deck, we're going to lose the whole building. So why invest in the restroom? So even after this, I think people will be happy that there's something done, but when they walk into the restrooms, they're still going to be disappointed. We are going to make an effort to do what we can over the next 2 years to make them look a little nicer. We don't want to invest tens of thousands of dollars just to turn around and rip it all out. So, so we will do our best to make them more presentable than they are now. But realistically, they need to just.
So this work is more than a Band-Aid, right? This is a solution to.
This is a structural solution, long-term solution for the building. Yeah.
The epoxy paint, good product. I mean, it's going to get a lot of wear and foot traffic. What sort of a maintenance will be needed to?
There really shouldn't be much maintenance on it. It's a waterproof coating, so even if we do have some water standing, it shouldn't do anything. Generally, those products, are things like what we'd see, on a hangar floor or something we'd see. The sports arena is a similar product, not the exact same product, but very, very durable product that's going to withstand. Because we are, we'll get people with the cleats on. We shouldn't have metal cleats up there, but it could happen. So we understand the type of foot traffic this is going to get. So it's actually a fairly flexible product. When we bid this out, we did an RFP as opposed to a hard bid, because we wanted the contractors should we did have some specs, but we also asked the contractors, are there products that you're familiar with that maybe will work better in this application? Ward Davis did actually recommend a little bit more of a flexible product. So as that building is going to move, and that's why we have cracks. It's going to continue to move. So hopefully this product was flexible enough that we won't see those cracks reflect through the coating. So.
And the concrete itself there on that second floor level, it's sound. It just simply needs to be patched in places and sealed.
Yep. Yeah, the major concern structurally with that is that we have water coming through it. We're not seeing a lot of major spalling or cracking where we have water that's getting in those cracks and then going through a freeze and thaw cycle. The water's going all the way through, and so the impact really is the rust that we're seeing.
To the steel
so these cracks that you're seeing here, then are the direct cause of some of this rust. That we have water that's coming through. I mean, granted, these are outside, so they're going to be wet. But if we don't have that water that's coming from the top just sitting there on them, hopefully we can slow that process down. I mean, we're not going to prevent them from rusting, and they are going to all get sandblasted and painted with an exterior, very high quality exterior paint. So, so we're kind of going at two ways. We're coating the steel. We're also trying to prevent water from getting into it as much as possible. So.
Justin, a side question on the issue of sales tax. Have you had a conversation with Ward about his confidence in getting the sales tax exemption certificate?
I have not, no.
As he indicates in his information here, that he would intend to apply for sales tax exemption, otherwise the sales tax will be added onto the pricing above.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this will be a sales tax exemption.
So
it's a public entity.
Yeah.
So it would be exempt?
Yes, that's something that we do with all of our projects.
Very good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess I missed that point. But yeah, with all of our projects, we'll generate a sales tax exempt form that they can have on
Very
hand
good.
for the duration
Okay.
of the project. Yep.
Yeah.
Good catch.
School districts, all of them have them.
Yeah. Yep. We do it with every project we do.
Every
so-
project?
Yep.
Excellent.
Other questions?
If I could put Tony on the spot for a minute. He shook his head no, but he's standing up anyways. From a programming standpoint, and I guess our customers being the ball teams that come out and play and all that stuff, will this obviously make it a more marketable venue? Are there other issues that we're not addressing that need to be brought to light as well?
To your first question, yes, definitely will present a better look than what's out there now. Justin touched on the restrooms. That definitely is something we're concerned about. The other areas, parking still an issue. The approach to the facility, but there's a lot of cosmetic things. This definitely solves the first problem of getting the building structurally sound. So, it does obviously help with marketing for out-of-town teams and so forth, but also just the pride of the local teams and residents. That facility hosts 800 local baseball, softball players just through Hutch Rec. That's not in addition to the tournaments or anything like that. And it's also home to HCC softball and Hutch High softball. So a lot of local use goes out there, and so for residents to see us maintaining and taking pride in what we do, I think is a big plus.
Absolutely. Sure. Thank you for indulging me. It's another one of our assets, another one of our deals as we talk about budgetary constraints and things like that, but we do have to take care of what we've got. I guess it's been a minute since I've been out there. I didn't realize the amount of corrosion that was on there, and it is quite the eyesore. I would certainly love to see it in a better state.
And I think it's fairly unique, is it not, Justin, Tony, in terms of that sort of a structure and viewing area and observation area that at least not that I'm widely traveled, but I've not seen another like it. So it's a unique element.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the new facilities that are being built, there is a structure in the middle, but it's generally just a simple concession and a restroom. It's not an upper deck. Where one of the great things about this for tournament play is you can stand and just walk that upper deck and watch 4 games at the same time. If you're a team maybe scouting another team, or we'll have showcase tournaments where we're have a little bit older youth out playing who are possibly looking for a scholarship down the road. Now we can have college scouts watch 4 games at one time, basically with walking 100 feet. Now they're watching the next game. So and also I think it just adds to just the atmosphere. That we have this really neat structure in the center that most communities don't. Even on the new facilities, they're just a little restroom or something in the middle. So.
Is there a motion?
I've got it here. Here it is. I move to approve the contract with Ward Davis Builders, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $217,793 for renovations to the Fun Valley Observation Deck, and authorize the mayor to sign any necessary documents.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to approve as presented. Is there any further discussion from council? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Item 7C, consider taxiway A seal coat grant request and construction services.
Morning, Peter.
Good morning. Peter Miller, Hutchinson Airport Manager, and I promise this is going to be quick and easy. So,
be careful what you promise there, Peter.
Well, if you ask questions, I don't know. But so I'm up here today in the first part of May this year. We entered into an agreement with our selected airport engineering consultant, H.W. Lochner, to prepare plans and specifications for taxiway alpha pavement maintenance plan, which included crack seal, seal coat, and remarking. They put the bid together. It went out to bid the first part of May. We opened up the bids June 25th, and the bids came in. There were two companies that bid: McConnell and Associates for $307,357.54, and Vance Brothers for $384,305.58. So McConnell and Associates out of Kansas City was the low bid for this project. This project is a 90-10 FAA grant, so we're only paying for 10% of that total project. This was programmed. We knew this was coming up. We've got a pavement maintenance program out there, so we knew this was coming up several years ago. So the grant match is already in the CIP budget for the airport for this year. The second half of this is for construction services for H.W. Lochner. So whenever there's an FAA project, they make sure that it's inspected and everything is done, according to spec. And so we have to put that portion of the project out to bid as well. 99.9% of the time, the design company that designed the plans is the one that applies to do the construction services. That is a separate agreement, which is covered 90% under that grant as well. So the Lochner proposed $56,500 for construction services throughout the project. That included the bidding, the closeout documents, and actually construction inspection. That contract was reviewed by the city engineering department and found to be fair and reasonable for the amount of work to be done with that project. So basically, I'm just asking for permission for the mayor to sign the construction observation contract, and to allow us to award the bid to McConnell Associates for the project.
So our part of this will be about $36,000, am I correct?
Yes, when it's all said and done. Yep.
Yeah.
39.
39.
Well, yeah, I think, what was the total? Yeah, 39,600. So.
Poor math. Thank you. Any comments, questions of Peter? I'm open for a motion.
Well, let's see. I would move to approve accepting the low bid from McConnell and Associates, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $307,357.54 for pavement maintenance associated with Taxiway Alpha at Hutchinson Regional Airport, and contract for construction services related to Taxiway Alpha at the Hutchinson Regional Airport as presented by Lochner in the amount not to exceed $56,500, and authorize the mayor to sign any necessary documents.
A second.
Been moved and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Thank you for your brevity, Peter.
You upheld your promise.
Yes.
Next item.
Item 8, report of city officials.
Jade?
Just have a happy Independence Day. Fireworks at 9:45 on the 4th, and don't forget the parade. Is that tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow.
Yeah,
10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Tomorrow 10.
No.
That's all I have.
Oh, yeah, it is tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
I know.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep, July 4th.
the week disappeared.
David?
Same. Happy 4th. But also, Jana, it was a pleasure working with you. You always helped explain things for dummies, so to speak, whenever I would ask certain things. You were always very well prepared and very thorough. So I just want to thank you for your time and service as well. Thank you.
John?
I would certainly echo Dave's comments, and I would convey, I think, in my observation, that you really, Jana, have taken the planning department to a new level, much more professional, streamlined organization that really, to your compliment, the staff you've assembled here, a real tribute to your leadership. So we'll certainly miss you, and the best to you.
Nancy?
Echoing the same, happy 4th, and good luck to Jana where she goes forward.
Nothing to add to what my compatriots have said. So,
How long do you think
Paul?
this executive
yeah,
session?
how long?
Well,
Well,
knowing the council as I do, let's try 12:20.
Oh, good gravy.
Get some meat on the
All right. Are you going to follow up with a motion then,
I
Jade?
move to recess into executive session pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exception KSA 75-4319B3 in order to discuss pending issues related to the 2019 contract negotiations with the city's bargaining units. The open meeting to resume in the city council chamber at 12:20 p.m.
Second.
Motion and a second for executive session. Excuse me. Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave White?
Yes.
Whoa, how'd I do that?
It worked.
It's okay.
It worked.
It worked.
All president
But
can
you notice
afford.
how